The video started.
Hi.
Oh, everyone say your name before you go up again, just
Okay.
per usual.
Wait.
Okay, I call this as to order, and without further ado, I call Prime Minister up to give their speech, not exceeding 7 minutes, with 15-second grace period. Here
I
we go.
can't believe you made me here. You just throwing me under the train. It's 7 minutes. Right? Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm Florence. Hi. Hi, Van. Okay, so firstly, I'm going to start my speech by giving you a few definitions on the motion. The motion specifies that we are replacing the U.S. primaries with a single-day national rank ballot system, and we like to argue that single day obviously means like the whole election happens on a single day. National means we are taking the whole population and we are letting them vote as individuals, and we're not letting them vote by state, not letting them vote by party. And our third definition is that ranked obviously means that the candidates, the results will be ranked by how many votes they get, like, counting based on individuals, right? All right, cool. So so what do our side think should be the criteria of judging what's best for a election system? So we think, like, obviously we have the democratic system, so what's most fair, what's most accurate, what's a most accurate representation of the population's opinion will give you the best voting system. Okay, so cool. 4 points, right? Firstly, why does our side of the house give you a better democratic system that is more equal and fair? Because by tolling the populations as individuals, not by state, not by party, you are giving the majority you're giving the majority the most say, which is how things should go in the democratic system. And where the current case is that by arranging them by geography, you are ignoring you're ignoring the population differences between each state, and you're allowing states with less population to have a monopoly over states with more population, such as Vermont versus California, right? And so obviously we think that because California has more people, they should have more say. And also, because they are arranged by states, I think you're giving too much power to the local domestic state politics, which already has representation on the Senate. So for example, if you're a Republican in California, your vote basically doesn't count. And I think that is an unfair to some people, because how much your vote counts should not be determined by where you live, right? And secondly, so why is it better for the candidates? Because it provides equal opportunities for the candidates, and that makes the system more fair. Because obviously, if you want to run for president, everyone should have an equal starting ground. And why is that? Because if we have a single-day election, small candidates won't be forced to drop out, because people will be like, oh, my vote will only count if we vote for the two dominant leading politicians. For example, right now we have Bernie and Joe Biden. And that eventually eliminates any chances given to smaller candidates. For example, we have Elizabeth Warren, who just dropped out. And third point, so for the single day and most up-to-date, for the third point, so why is a single day election most up-to-date and most accurate? It is because in a single day election, it's like virtually impossible for people to drop out, right? So therefore, every single vote will count. Whereas in the current situation, people who voted for like Andrew Yang or voted for Elizabeth Warren, their votes won't count, and therefore that will be less accurate of the representation than our side of the house. 4 point. So in terms of political unity, why would our side of the house promote more political unity? Because by grouping everyone as individuals, as a nation together into a common election, we are viewing them, assessing their views as individuals instead of like extremely colored by their party backgrounds as it is right now. So by mixing and matching both Democratic and Republican candidates, people are forced to look at the views of every single individuals, and you're not really voting by party, you're voting by views and individuals. And why is that important? Because by doing that, you're not reinforcing the bipartisan system that the U.S. currently has, which is detrimental because it's dividing, polarizing the nation into Democrats and Republicans, and they don't really understand each other, don't try to communicate, and that's dividing the nation, segregating the nation into two parts. And our side of the house will solve that problem. And secondly, it will also offer more chances to smaller parties like the U.S. Green Party. And why is that? Because instead of everyone just looking at the two, looking at candidates from the two big parties, they can also look at candidates as individuals who are grouped into this whole national individualized voting system. So you give more chances and more representatives to smaller parties, and also you solve the huge you have a better chance at solving the huge problem of political polarization within the states. So why is our side of the house? Yes.
So considering that we're talking about a primary here and not the general election, how would the Green Party benefit from this if the Green Party is just going to have their own primary either way?
I didn't quite hear you. So I'm gonna go on. Talking about the impact of our house, right? So so why does our side of the house better? Because by giving by basing the votes by basing votes on population, not geography, we'll argue that we'll give the majority a more we'll give every individual equal fair share of the power, the voting power they deserve as a citizen, instead of as a citizen of the United States, instead of as a citizen of a specific state. And it's more democratic because you get rid of state biases and minorities within each state, such as Republicans in California, will have their fair share of voting power, right? And it is more accurate because by eliminating the process which forces smaller candidates to drop out, you're basically saying that you're basically giving every candidate and platform an equal opportunity for which they can vote, they can run their campaign on.
Okay. I'd like to thank the speaker for their honorable remark, and I'd like to the floor the leader of the opposition to open this debate for opposition bench. Hear, hear.
Seven.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Mike. Okay.
I've always wanted to use that. Ever since that Cornell girl used that on me, I've always wanted to. So funny. Okay, sorry.
So, as the opposition, we believe that U.S. primaries should stay as the system of election for the United States, instead of being replaced by a single-day national ranked ballot system. To refute some of the opposition's points, a single-day ranked choice system only allows for big-name candidates to do well. Smaller candidates benefit from having a very long, drawn-out primary. But if the primary is only on one day, then you'd have the case of just the most popular candidate easily getting all the votes because no one else would have the opportunity to prove themselves to the electorate. Secondly, the system we have right now, despite what the opposition says, is fairly proportional. Within the primary, the delegates are determined by your population size and apportioned as such. That's why the winner of, and then the third point. So with a ranked choice system, there's never a clear winner. There's usually a lack of a popular mandate because they can ignore the plurality and say the third place finisher with 20% of the vote can end up finishing in first place. Fourth, you have a choice within your party of many different candidates. So, despite what the opposition said about certain, views being ignored or whatever, no, that's not the case. In fact, within your party, a competitive, long, drawn-out primary will give you many different choices as to who you want to support and ensure that the different ideological wings of the party are represented.
On that, okay, so in the U.S. primary system, specifically in the presidential election, by the time you get to later states, a lot of those diverse candidates that you've talked about have already dropped out because they, one, don't have the finances to continue, or they don't have support in certain states that determines it. Through our system, you're actually going to see like people being able to vote for the candidate they want on that single day.
That is true, yes, but at the same time, our current system allows for more of a consensus around one candidate. On top of that, you are also the views of the different ideological wings are represented, and they actually end up coalescing behind a few different candidates rather than just being all spread out through, say, like 10 different candidates. So, Finn, and just to touch on the point of the third parties have their own system, which allows them to organize around like-minded people, so there's really no problem there with lack of representation. So, to lay out our argument, the U.S. primary system right now, it allows for candidates to prove themselves over time. They have to campaign in each state and appeal to each of those states' populations. And the process of elimination weeds out the lesser candidates as dictated by the people in those states. So instead of just going to major population centers and such, candidates right now under the current system are forced to branch out to different parts of the country that would normally be underrepresented and prove themselves to those people. Secondly, because of that, they have to tailor the policy to the different groups of people. You can't just have one policy tailored to the majority of the demographics in the country. You have to appeal to rural whites in Montana as well as African Americans in South Carolina, rather than just people, say, in major population centers as New York or such. And this is incredibly important because it'll ensure that the entire nation is represented in this process. No state will be underrepresented, and no state will be underrepresented, and the people can weed out the weaker candidates and coalesce behind a stronger one. And obviously, this is incredibly important because elections are the backbone of our democracy. Therefore, we think that the U.S. primary system should be favored because it allows for a long, drawn-out process where each candidate has to appeal to many different demographics within the U.S. and prove themselves worthy of representing those people in the government. And yeah, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Here, I'd like to thank the speaker for their honorable remarks. I now call to the floor the Deputy Prime Minister to give a speech not exceeding 7 minutes with 15-second grace period. Here. 7-minute grace period.
I'm Steven. Hi, Pia.
Wow, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know what this is. Okay. Time starts now. First, move on to your refutations of some of their points. First of all, they talk about how our system will only select the most popular candidates, and we want to talk about that's our goal because democratic system means that you're voting according to the willing of majority. So if the candidate is not even popular, then why are you gonna even vote for them? And B, we say that in the status quo is that the small candidates are already underrepresented. So the case for the opposition side is defending status quo, so they have no reason to show that why their case is better for small candidates in this scenario. And moving on to the point that how on their side of the house, they're forming a consensus among a larger group of people. However, because we have so many candidates that we're not even forming a consensus. However, we tell you that such consensus formed on their side of the house is a forced consensus. It's not a real consensus. You have such consensus not because you're really agreeing with each other, but actually because you only have limited amount of choice. So this is not the most accurate representation of people's willingness. However, on our side of the house, even if people go to various kind of choices. We tell you it is most accurate in this case. So that's the reason why, even if like people do not agree, like and forming a consensus, like is still better than their side of the house, and also they provide like no impact to their consensus. And so that's the reason why you should not like vote like for based on that argument. However, on our side of the house, even if we do not have consensus opinions, we do have like political unity impact. What does that mean? That means that like people's like individual ballots are not evaluated based on parties and like political party value, but actually based on their individual. What does that mean? That means that like for example, in some large states, if you're like not you're not one of the major party members, for example, you're like a Republican in California, then like your voice can be equally represented in our scenario. However, like your voice cannot be represented in the status quo because the majority in states instead of the nation outweigh you. And this is illegitimate because the democratic system, it should be run like nationwide instead of statewide. And what does that mean? That means that people have like equal vote in a nation instead of when people have equal in states. So you should not let the state majority to decide your decision, but the nation majority to decide the fate of the country. So we say that it is more legitimate for our side of the house to say that individuals have the power to directly vote for the president instead it goes to the party value and got affected by the state's preference and state's political preference indirectly. And moving on to how they talk about like we're not benefiting third party, like we're having a very blurry definition of primary, so we're taking out of that argument. We can see that we're not benefiting the third party. So okay, moving on to how they talk about policies to benefit because in the status quo, the candidates will go to different states, including those states with small population, and they will like preach them. They will talk about their policies to them. However, we tell that like this is not unique because even if in our side of the house, like because there are so many candidates, so there's no single candidate can be sure that they're winning a state. They're running under the mindset that like candidates in our side of the house can still win a state. However, we cannot win a state, so no candidates can be so certain that they can win a population nationwide because all of the ideas are competing together and all of the steps are taken in one day. So no candidates can be make sure that they're winning the election. So all of the efforts should be samely put in our scenario. So we tell that this like argument is not unique. They also talk about by talking to like different groups of people, like we can actually bring up like different kind of policies accommodate to the need of the minority. However, like democratic value is serving for the willing of majority. So like, even if like you don't say it, like even if like you don't believe it, we tell like democratic value is necessarily just. It's like basically authoritarian like of majority over minority. So like if you're not accurately reflecting the willing of majority, like you're going against your democratic value. Like and even if you do not believe that, we tell that like minority in the case is actually equally benefiting in our side scenario because we tell that like there's still like the candidates going to different areas and talking to the different candidates because they are not sure whether they're winning this like election or not. So that's the reason why they'll still like accommodate different policies and like accommodate to the need of the minority group. Yeah. Yeah, backside.
If there are 100 people in the country and 80 people agrees to kill the other 20 people and the government decides to kill the
Yeah,
20 people
it
based on
should
that
because
population.
Socrates is actually voted like excels in the ancient Greece. So this is what democratic value means. Democratic value, according to Socrates, Aristotle, and also like other Greek philosophers, is intrinsically a given form of government. The reason why, like in the status quo, we're running under the democratic value because in practice, it is the best form of government. However, theoretically, democratic value is no different from with the tyranny of majority. So the status quo is that the United States is already running under the democratic value. So we're not talking about whether this form of value is just or not, because if we go against it, the harm will be even bigger. So we're talking about which kind of electoral system can actually serve best for the democratic value. We're not defending the democratic system at all. So moving on to some of our impact evaluation. You're welcome.
Wow, such a chaotic poll.
Also, we talk about on our side of the house. A new argument is that it is harder for like foreign countries to manipulate the result of the election because like it's all of the election, all of the positions are happening in such a quick, are happening in a single day, which means that it is like quicker and harder to manipulate. For example, like Russia will not be able to like vote for Trump if like Trump is only elected in one day instead of like the long process of campaign and election. And also we talk about we're also helping the candidates like within us. We're reducing the competition for the candidates within the same party because like usually in the current status quo you can only vote for one candidate in each like a party, and then like one candidate go against each other, and by the end of the day, by the end of the election, however, by putting every single candidate together, like we stop the competition like between within the party, which means that like the ideas, if there are like two equally excellent candidates in a party, like we can vote them up like equally. And we talk about and we believe that our side of the house is like more just because A, it like reflect the more accurately reflect the willing of people, and B, we reach out to like the same amount of people, so they do not necessarily talk about how like there's a net benefit in terms of population. And thirdly, we talk about we're serving the democratic value most because we're representing the people's preference on nationwide instead of statewide.
I thank that speaker for their honorable remarks. And I now call to the floor the deputy leader of the opposition to close out the top half of the debate. Here, here.
Why do I feel like I'm not me?
Wait, I did not. I said we do not defend them.
I thought it was good. I said there's our criteria of judging.
It's good.
Don't excuse me. I wasn't here for the first half of your speech, so I didn't hear
Justin.
This one? You want me to kind of throw it?
Give it a good toss.
No.
You all good?
Yeah.
I'm going to start off by clarifying some of the misconceptions in this round, specifically related to the difference between a primary and a general election. So, with the primary, here's some things we're talking about. One of the things they like to mention is that, when you have this system of states only, it really silences all the minority of the state, because then you have this thing where it's a winner take all, and then everyone else who's not part of that majority has no incentive to vote, and their votes are silenced. That's not the case with the primary, because with the primary, the delegates are given out proportionally to the vote that's received. So even if you have 30% of the voting population, you're going to get 30% of the delegates. We think that applies to states. But we also think that what happens with these differences between states, they like to mention the difference between Vermont and California. And they say that, Vermont or California is really silenced because Vermont has this huge influence. But again, states themselves are allocated delegates proportionally to their size. So it doesn't skew the electoral field at all. Secondly, going into what it's saying, they like to mention this, one of the points that they just brought out was this weird thing about how it somehow better protects election security, because somehow the Russians will then have to target everything on one day, and they won't have the time. The thing that doesn't make sense to me is, you say that, candidates will definitely have plenty of time in the world to prepare for this election, even if it's all on one day. And then you also say that Russians won't have time to prepare for the election if it's on one day. Pick one of those. But then also we don't think that the Russians are necessarily going to be significantly damaged on our side of the house, because if they're going to choose one or few states to specifically target as it is, they'll still choose those same states to target on your side of the house. It doesn't make any sense how having it on the same day will stop them. Going into another thing, the closing government's going to come up here, and they're going to give you this idea that many states don't have the right to vote respected because they come later in the primary system, and by that point, more diverse candidates have already been dropped out of the race. And yes, this is something that happens, and there is a discrepancy in which states receive attention under the current system. Iowa receives a ton of attention. New Hampshire receives a ton of attention. Nevada receives a ton of attention, and so does South Carolina. But these states are inherently states that do not receive attention as it is generally in politics. The states that get a bump in attention on our side of the house are the states that truly do need the attention. And here's what's going to happen under their status quo. Under a national vote, all of the attention is going to go to mega population centers where they can quickly and efficiently garner plenty of votes, which are the cities. So yes, he can come up here and point out that there are going to be several states that vote late in the primary calendar that don't get as much attention. But switching over to our side of the house is just going to eliminate every bit of representation whatsoever from rural areas. So he's going to come up here and give an example of New York, which votes later in its primary system and therefore gets less attention. But New York is already a state that's incredibly wealthy and has a tremendous amount of power. But our side of the house better influences and better supports the votes of places such as South Carolina and Nevada and Iowa and New Hampshire, which, as we have already shown, do not receive attention politically or economically otherwise if it weren't for this system. So this system, we agree that on both sides of the house, there are going to be places that do not receive equal attention. That's just the status quo of politics. But as opposed to on their side of the house, where it's simply just the big population centers garnering all the attention, on our side, it is a lot of these smaller, more underrepresented places that get that attention from being first and earlier in this. Going to something else and clarifying what we were saying on our side, there are several benefits to having this primary system. One is that it gives the ability for the candidates to show themselves under certain situations and prove their strength. As we can see before, with the current primary system, you have candidates such as like Pete Buttigieg, who went to South Carolina and demonstrated a complete inability to garner minority votes whatsoever. That would have been an incredible weakness had it come to the general election. But if it had just been a nationwide single-day primary, he could have been able to garner that vote. No, thank you, not right now. He could have been able to get the nomination with solely the majority white votes, and then he would have gone into the general election with that fatal weakness that had never been exposed by the primary system that we currently have. The candidates that do well under our system are candidates that are able to show that they can do well in Iowa, which is majority white. They can do well in South Carolina, which is majority minority. So when you go through this staggered set of proving grounds, the candidates that emerge out at the end are the candidates that are able to handle all the situations, not just a blanket where the majority white Democratic voters can select the candidate without showing these weaknesses. Yes.
Man, but you're forgetting that it's not only single day and national, but it's also a ranked ballot system, right?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that, considering that if Pete doesn't do well with African American voters, right, it's not going to translate well on the ranked ballot system, and it'll be ranked low, and it's not like he'll just be decided, like he wouldn't have won anyway if he doesn't get the minority vote from the Democratic Party.
Yeah, so you're trying to come up here and say that all of these problems and all of these preferences of individual states and their unique characteristics will be shown by the ranked ballot choice system. But that's just a complete mess, because there's several problems with ranked ballot choice. One is that you never get a true, clear winner that has a strong mandate for like electoral victory. In a lot of the cases, and specifically Australia where they have this, it is very muddled and it is very clear. In Australia, there's been the case where a party that has gotten 30% of the first place votes gets elected into office over a party that got over 40% of the first place votes because of confusing second and third place votes. And we think that this forms a lot of weird coalitions where people are trying to snipe for second and third place votes, which just muddles politics and makes it incredibly confusing for people to grasp and understand. And we don't necessarily agree that somehow by someone not ranking Pete Buttigieg as their second or third ranked choice, that's going to have a major impact on exposing his inability to connect with African American voters. We think that ultimately the best way to show this is by having that specific focused attention that comes from having a primary or a state that goes on one specific day, where you get the benefit of not only the candidates having to prove themselves doing well in that situation, but the voters of those states getting the specialized attention where the candidates have to adapt their specific needs. So ultimately, yes, there are going to be discrepancies in attention on both sides of the House, but the status quo currently benefits those states that are already underrepresented and promotes the ability of smaller candidates such as Barack Obama to do well in the electoral system and prove themselves over time, as opposed to just a single day where the vast majority leading candidate gets elected. For these reasons, we are proud to
I have a question.
Okay, no worries. So, at least you passed this.
Yeah, I'm actually not really familiar with the topic, but I learned a lot out of it.
That's okay. I think that's it for our remarks. We now call to the floor the member of government to close out this debate here. Honorable panel, the key aspect missing from this debate thus far is the inclusion of the ranked ballot system into this debate, right? Open government talks a lot about like the single day and the national, which I'm still going to talk about and explain the links that they don't have. But I'm also going to get further into the ranked ballot system, and OO also largely neglects this as well. I'm going to do three things for you in the speech. First, I'm going to go through my extensions. And I'm going to do some extraneous rebuttal of what has just been said by opening opposition, and then I'll do some weighing. So first, into our first extension, or the first point I'm going to do for you is, I guess it's kind of extension, is actually explain to you like what a ranked ballot system is, right? So in a ranked ballot system, like especially in like the context of the U.S. primary, what this means is that like in the primary for the party, basically, when you have like say like 5 candidates, right? You rank from 1 to 5. How would you prefer to have those candidates elected, right? And so like the first place choice has like more weight than a second choice, and third choice then second has more than a third, and thus far certain points are allocated, right? So what this does is that it like allows you to like order it and give weight to different candidates in different orders, rather than just like having to pick between like a moderate versus a progressive, or like this candidate versus that candidate, right? And say like, well, which one is the best one to pick? And so what this means is that you can actually see like what proportion like people kind of support, fully support, most support, kind of support less, and like most like outright don't really support, right? And that's what ranked ballot system actually looks like. So my second extension is why this actually gets rid of strategic voting and makes voting count more as well on like a principled level. Right? So what happens in the status quo with U.S. primaries for the presidential election? What happens in the status quo is what happens a lot of time is people will make a strategic vote. They'll say, okay, well, maybe I like Pete Buttigieg the most, right? He's the moderate that speaks to me the most, and I agree with their policies. But they're not going to. I think that maybe they don't have as good shot of win of like beating out the progressive like Sanders, right? And so they'll vote for Biden because he's the name recognition. So to take this out of the example, right? They'll vote for someone that they think is more likely to win rather than the person that they think actually represents their views. So what this means is that people aren't actually voting for the candidate that they feel best represents them and their ideas for policy and their beliefs in the society. This is like antithetical to the whole idea of like democracy and democratic voting, right? Is voting for someone in office who's supposed to like vote for you in the legislature, or like to enact policies in the executive office or in office at all that are like going to be like the policies that you want and are going to point the country in the direction that you would like. What happens in ranked choice voting, however, though, is that you can put the person that you agree with most, and then you can also order it so that you can put maybe someone who you agree with a little less, but you think is more likely to win second, right? Because what you see now is most people engage in the strategic voting, where they are going to like actively like try to make sure the progressive doesn't win or the far right candidate doesn't win and go more moderate. But in that, like, pick the one that they agree with less, right? Rather than someone somewhere in the middle of their party, or something like that, right? And so what this means is that people aren't actually voting based on what they believe in, but who they think is most likely to win, who they think is going to be the best, like most likely to beat out the other candidates. And it doesn't allow for people to actually truly exercise their democratic votes and their democratic voice. In addition to this, what you see is it like also splits votes, right? Because like in a winner-take-all primary system, like regardless if it goes state by state or if it's national, right? What you see is that like votes get split. Like if you have 2 progressives and a moderate, or 2 far right and 1 moderate, like the moderate or the far left or right will get split, and the moderate will get more of the vote, or vice versa, right? If it was split, if it was the other way around. And what you see is that like then like the person could like who doesn't really have a ton of support, it might be most people's third choice, actually gets elected, whereas in a ranked ballot system, like people could put the first progressive and the second progressive and then the moderate, and if most people are more progressive, a progressive will come out on top, or one of the 2 will come out on top, rather than the moderate and the progressive vote being split. Yeah, I'll take you.
Can you also buy the case where a lot of people agree and vote first place for a more radical candidate, but then everyone has like the same moderate down below with the third choice who they don't really like, but just put there anyways, and that person gets elected?
I mean, yes, you can also have that, but like that's a like better system than just like everybody voting for the moderate outright, like voting for like the moderate outright, or like if you have everyone voting for like the radical right and they're split. Like I don't see a way, unless there's like 8 radicals, like, which doesn't happen in the U.S. like in primary field, are going to like actually like be able to like take the vote and like make it go towards the moderate. Like that's not a likely situation. Like think about this in the context of the U.S. primary. Like most people drop out before it gets to the first race even. Secondly, so my third extension about why is this most likely to get the most representative candidate for the party and like unite the party / like avoid gridlock, right? So what you see is that like people are actually going to like vote for who they believe in, and they're going to vote for like which candidate they most strongly associate with, rather than like the strategic voting, right? So this avoids like people getting locked into like a moderate candidate that they like begrudgingly vote for just because they don't like the really like progressive or socialist candidate or like really far right candidate, right? And so what this means is like OO tries to tell you that like, oh, what this means is that like someone with only 30% of the vote can get elected. It's like, yes, like that's the case, but if they have more than every other single candidate, then they are the most representative of the field, right, that people want. And so what this means is that they're actually going to have to like cater to different groups. Like OO tries to tell you, oh, they don't have to reach out to different demographics because it's national, right? But that's not true, because you still like if it's in the primary system, because states still have like delegates per state based on population, you still have to reach out, right? Like if they and this is kind of like rebuttal of them too. If they say like, oh, well, you like they say, oh, well, you know, some candidates can reach out to like will only reach out to the big urban areas. And it's like, well, yeah, but if there's like a candidate that's only reaching out to the urban areas and none of the rural areas going to vote for them, and they're not going to win because the urban isn't enough, because it's still based on the delegates are based on population to a degree, right? It's still like there's nothing says that we're getting rid of the state delegate system. We're just changing it to a single day national ranked ballot system, right? Like you still have delegates based on you can still have those different delegates based on population, right? The fourth extension is kind of like it's better for candidates, like smaller candidates, in terms of like not having to like your protected time to like keep on like if they're going on along through the states, like financially keep up their system, their campaign, even if they can, and they're like kind of holding in there, but they don't have the finances. If it's one day, it just happens and they're done, right? So what happens in this? What happened in this debate, right? What you see is from opening opposition is they talk, or opening opposition talks a lot about like, oh, candidates have to tailor different demographics. We explain how that still happens in our side of the house, and they talk about like, oh, Iowa or other states need attention. They still get attention like in the process. Like they just won't get the candidate won't get that vote if that happens, right? So when you're weighing this debate, you should take the better representative form of democracy, true democracy, over this like demographic idea they bring you with Schutzenhold. Proud to propose.